Welcome back, everybody, to Watcher of All Things. My name is Kiki, and this is my podcast where I talk movies, TV shows, and all things entertainment. And today, it is a Uncanny Valley special. We have episode 42, the Robert Zemeckis movie Here, with Tom Hanks, Robin Wright, Forrest Gump, and Jenny reuniting in an AI nightmare film. I was hesitant to review this movie for the podcast because I was like, is anyone going to really see this? But it is such a nightmare and such a clear damnation of the future of filmmaking. If, Robert Zemeckis is a special guy, but like if more filmmakers want to do this, terrifying indications. Happy Halloween hangover. I'm recording this on Friday, November 1st, so had lots of candy yesterday. I live in the country with my parents, so I think we had 0 trick-or-treaters last night. Yikes. But we get candy anyways, because some years there's like 3 or 5 people, so bit of a candy hangover. And then I went to a lovely 9:45 showing of the movie Here. What's your favorite Halloween candy? What do you think? When I was a kid, I really liked getting a mixture of chocolate and chips. I'm more of a chips and like crunchy stuff kind of guy, but I do love chocolate. My favorite chocolate is hands down probably Reese's Pieces or like Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Anything peanut butter and chocolate is so good. Or O. Henry. Oh, I love O. Henry's. And then I just love like any chip flavor, really. There's no chip flavor that I don't like. Oh man, to be a child again and just get to go around asking people for candy. I miss it. One of my favorite Halloween costumes was in junior kindergarten, I was Superman. That would have been Superman Returns Superman, so Brandon Routh. Or maybe not. I don't know. Because I would have been in junior kindergarten in like 2004, 2005, or 2002. Yeah, around there. I think Superman Returns came out in 2006. My mom said I didn't take my mask off, the Brandon Routh or Superman mask, probably for like 6 weeks or something crazy. Like I just kept wearing it to school. And actually, I brought this up with my girlfriend last night that when we were in kindergarten at my elementary school, the junior kindergarten and senior kindergartens would walk around and do like a Halloween march and go classroom to classroom, marching through the class, showing everyone their costumes to like music. Oh, damn, that was so much fun. It was cool. Everyone looking at me as Superman, and just getting candy from all the teachers and then going trick-or-treating at night. But now Halloween's over. It is Christmas time. I mean, for Americans, it's moving into Thanksgiving, but in Canada, after Remembrance Day, like out of respect, after Remembrance Day, I go in full holiday mode. Leve just put her Christmas EP out today. I think I've already listened to it 40 times. It's so great. I live for the Leve Christmas music, but let's stay in the present. Let's stay right here. No pun intended. Oh my God. We're going to get into it about that word in the movie. But before we get into the news, because there's lots of news to talk about today, we're going to talk about some scheduling issues for movies, some things being moved up and moved back, perhaps some English development versions of very popular foreign TV shows, another Netflix conflict with the creator where they're pushing back on their model, maybe some AI pushback, and the return of a beloved franchise that I think has the opportunity to do something very fun. We have lots to talk about today. Before we get into the news, though, there are timestamps below in the show notes or in the description if you're listening on YouTube. If you want to avoid the spoiler section in the Here review, you can just listen to the non-spoiler stuff. I keep it pretty light, although kind of what's in the trailer is what you get, really. A lot like Venom last week. It's really one of those trailers that, they just showed everything. But anyways, show notes below. Go follow on all the social medias, of course, rate and review, all that good stuff. But let's get into the news. Okay, the first piece of news, apparently, now we've talked about this recently, about the shooting schedule for Dune Messiah, how that's going to work considering Zendaya's schedule, other actor schedules, the availability of a certain cinematographer that I want to be involved in another project I'm very passionate about. So, Dune Messiah, this comes from tons of different outlets, but mainly from the Hollywood Reporter. Apparently, Dune Messiah's production may begin early summer 2025. Now, this is an issue for many parties involved because, first of all, let's start with Zendaya. Apparently, she is going to be a part of Spider-Man 4. That's shooting in summer 2025. So how much of a part she plays in that film, I'm not sure. She's currently, just yesterday, the first set photos from her film with Robert Pattinson, The Drama, came out. They were filming in Boston, but she wasn't on set because I guess it's not her part. So I think she's shooting that until January. Then in January, they start Euphoria, season 3. Then in summer, it's supposed to be Spider-Man 4. Again, not sure how how involved, considering how Spider-Man No Way Home ended. I hope she's not that involved because I'd like them to move on from that story. But if she is, how is she going to film that and Dune Messiah at the same time? Because also keep in mind that literally last week or the week before, Denis Villeneuve said we're starting in early 2026 for Dune Messiah. Like, that is our plan, and everyone rejoiced because Greg Fraser, I've never seen a cinematographer's schedule be talked about so much. People are stressed because the Batman Part 2 starts filming in the new year, possibly February, March, something like that, because it has an October 2026 release. Everyone is stressed, and Matt Reeves himself has said, I'm not sure if he's coming back. Whether Greg Fraser, is he going to do the Batman Part 2 or Dune Messiah? I've seen a few different Twitter posts this week being like, would you rather, what project would people rather he do? And I'm honestly of the mind that I would rather he does the Batman Part 2. I think there's a lot of great cinematographers out there that could bring something different to Dune Messiah. Considering how different the book Dune Messiah is to the first Dune book, I think a visual change could be very interesting for the story itself, whereas the Batman Part 2 is very much going to be a overall continuation of the exact same story. It's a Part 2 versus Dune Messiah is another chapter, an entire story. Like, Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2 were one thing, and actually that's a loophole that they're possibly going to get Hans Zimmer nominated for an Oscar, is saying that, well, of course there's going to be shared parts because it's all one big story. It's not two separate properties. So rejoice, Hans Zimmer fans. But back to Greg Fraser. I think, honestly, if I were him, I would rather he does the Batman Part 2 because the visual elements of that movie were so important. I think Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2 are gorgeous, but now that they're moving on to a new story that takes place 12 years later, I think there's tons of great cinematographers that could do a really wonderful job with Denis Villeneuve. And, it's Dune Messiah is such a different book. It becomes way more philosophical, I don't know, kind of psychedelic, different than the first one, the first Dune book. So I think a visual change could refresh not refresh the franchise. It's not like it's going stale, but I think could add an emphasis of how different these stories are, versus the Batman Part 1 to Part 2. There's not going to be a lot of change because the two movies are taking place 4 weeks, 5 weeks apart, something like that. So I think you need that continuation versus Dune Part 1 and Part 2 to Dune Messiah. I think it's okay that a lot changes. I think a lot of characters should look different if there's going to be a 12-year time jump. I think the music needs to be a lot different. I think they really need to change the music from the first two. I love the first two scores, but I think you really want to just go on a completely different path for Dune Messiah. A lot of those Twitter posts I mentioned, most people said exactly what I just said. Like I said, I've never seen everyone stressing over a cinematographer's schedule so much. It's insane. But either way, I'm very excited for both movies. If someone asked me, you can only watch one of them, I would probably say the Batman Part 2, but it would kill me to not see Dune Messiah. I am so excited. I'm on Chapter House Dune right now. I started it this week. It's just as, I don't know, just underwhelming as Heretics of Dune was for me. And I'm going away for work. Actually, I'll be gone when this episode comes out. I'm going away for work, so I'm hoping at night I can read a lot of my books, maybe listen to the audiobook while I'm driving. But I'm trying to finish it for Dune Prophecy, which comes out in a couple weeks, and I believe they've screened the first episode. I think they had a special screening for Dune Prophecy the other day. But speaking of big filmmakers, David Fincher is apparently eyeing to make a English version of Squid Game. What the hell are we doing here? Why? We don't need these English remakes. It's seriously so infuriating that people can't get over subtitles or dubbing. If you really want to hear an English version of Squid Game, just put the dub on Netflix, whatever. I never go dubs. I always go subtitles because I like the original emotions of the performers. But Netflix, why are we wasting the money to make an English version of Squid Game? What is going to change about the story making it an American version or an English version? It doesn't need to be done at all. Squid Game was such a lightning in a bottle first season, and making it English isn't going to improve it at all. Aren't they doing a Last Round remake with Leonardo DiCaprio of the Mads Mikkelsen movie? Is that what it's called? What's the point? People can just watch a foreign film with subtitles on. It's exactly like Bong Joon-ho said, which I think I said recently on the podcast, the only thing keeping people from discovering great cinema is 1 inch of subtitles. Who cares? You have to read a little bit during a film. You watch movies with subtitles all the time. You watch Star Wars. You watch Dune. Dune has foreign languages in it where you have to, read subtitles of what they're saying. I just, I don't get it. It bothers me so much. But let's stay on the Netflix path, because last week went on a huge tangent about Daniel Craig and Netflix. Well, it looks like he's not the only one pushing back against Ted Sarandos and his shitty business model, because Netflix and IMAX are in talks to release Greta Gerwig's Narnia movie over Thanksgiving 2026. So last week we talked about Benoit Blanc, Mr. Daniel Craig, and Rian Johnson being pissed at Netflix. They want the third Knives Out movie to get a theatrical run because they believe Glass Onion and marketing people said it could have made like $600 million, but they put it straight to streaming and very limited theater release. Greta Gerwig, there's been tons of rumors this week that she is pissed at Netflix and she's seriously pushing back on doing the films and wants a theatrical IMAX release. Like, if you're going to make Chronicles of Narnia, make this huge franchise that people loved. When I was a kid, Narnia was massive. Oh my God. If you're going to remake them and put like one of the biggest directors for a lot of people right now, you're going to put Greta Gerwig on Narnia and remake it, get it in IMAX theaters. Apparently she's pushing back to have it in like 2,000 IMAX theaters or something like that. This comes from World of Real that Greta Gerwig had voiced concerns about limiting her Narnia movies to Netflix's streaming platform. Matt Belloni reported that Greta Gerwig was originally bummed out by the streamer's theatrical model. Then again, she knew the consequences of her actions when she signed on to direct these movies. Also, World of Real is saying that we could see Daniel Craig and Rian Johnson might use this Narnia going in IMAX to leverage their Knives Out 3 to hit theaters as well. Again, it's like I said last week, I think a lot of creators and people that are working for Netflix are going to start pushing back against their model and say, look, you may have all of the budget, but your delivery system and your execution of all these projects is absolute garbage. Like, there's anything Netflix doesn't have cultural impact. Like Stranger Things, people watch it every year and then it's kind of forgotten about for the rest of the year, in my opinion. Squid Game, Baby Reindeer, a lot of these great Netflix shows that you watch are relevant for 2 weeks in the year. And same with, like, people forget The Bear came out this year. There was a new season of The Bear. If it was week to week, it creates way more of a buzz. You look at a show that, like, I'm watching Only Murders in the Building. The week to week buildup of that show is amazing. The Penguin as well. People are going crazy online for The Penguin and the viewership is through the roof for the show. Like, it just continues to knock it out of the park. It's so impressive, the streaming numbers, viewing numbers of The Penguin every single week. Like, it's one of the best streamed shows right now. And like, same with like Game of Thrones. Everything HBO does week to week gets crazy numbers because it's just doing extremely well, versus like all these Disney models and I don't know, Netflix models where they just dump it all at once. People talk about it for one weekend and then it's just completely dead in the water. I don't know. It just doesn't create any lasting impression versus other shows like The Last of Us. People were going nuts for 8 weeks or 10 weeks or however many episodes there were. Like, it was continually talked about. And I think that really pays off in an award season because it stays in your mind longer because it was a bigger chunk of your life where you were watching this one show. It's very frustrating. The Netflix model is very frustrating to me because I think they do have some good properties. I do think they make some good things, but they don't know how to roll them out in a way that's going to be meaningful and get you like more of whether an awards run or just like keep viewership going and keep people intrigued with your show. People will subscribe to Netflix for 1 month in a year just to binge their favorite show that comes out once every 6 years if you're a Stranger Things fan. Like, it's insane. But speaking of stars pushing back against the current industry, Robert Downey Jr. has issued a warning for future executives who might use AI to recreate his likeness. He said, "My law firm will still be very active." So Robert Downey Jr. was talking about, digital scans and like owning the likeness of actors and stuff like that. And he basically threatened this week that any executive who thinks they're going to use my likeness without my permission or try and own a scan of me without me knowing, prepare to be sued. And I honestly, I could believe that Robert Downey Jr. would take on a big company. He's loaded. He's absolutely loaded. Think of how much money he's going to make from playing Doctor Doom, how much he's made. There's rumors that he's made like $500 million total from playing Iron Man over the years, which I believe it. They built an entire franchise on his back. Like, he is the OG at Marvel, along with the other Avengers that are like from the original 5 or 6 or whatever. Like, that original core group has all made probably so much money and fame off of it, of course, and like rightfully so. They changed the industry pretty much. Still, Robert Downey Jr., I'm loving this public declaration. I wish we would see more continual pushback. Like, Blumhouse just announced that they're going to start using AI in their films, and now everybody's just shitting on Blumhouse. The film we're going to talk about today, we are unfortunately going to have to talk about AI because it played a large role in this film, which is very we'll save that. We'll save it. It's very obvious, but we'll save that for the discussion. You gotta stick around to listen. But Robert Downey Jr., you go, girl. Okay, final piece of news because I have so much to say about the film we're gonna talk about today. The Wayans brothers are reuniting for a new Scary Movie. Now, the Scary Movies were very fun parodies of Scream and like every horror trope, and it's like a classic. I mean, they're very funny. I think I've seen them all, but when I was way younger, and just recently my girlfriend and I started the first one, but then I think we had to like leave or we got distracted by something, so we turned it off. But they're great. Now, I'm very excited about this. I think it's about time that we got another parody movie. We don't get enough parody movies, and I think it's like kind of a lost art form. I would really love if we got like an updated scary movie, you know, and everyone on Twitter, including myself this week, all had the same idea. You put Melissa Barrera, and you don't just put her, you put Jenna Ortega and Melissa Barrera in this film, because remember, Melissa Barrera was fired from Screen for talking about Palestine and the genocide in Palestine. Jenna Ortega was renegotiating her deal, and they weren't going to pay her enough. And then once Melissa Barrera was fired, she apparently walked away and said like, oh yeah, you guys are garbage. Okay, and now they're just going to go back to, the Screen people are just going to get Nev Campbell and Courtney Cox to come back and pay them a boatload of money for another reboot with them or whatever. So for this, you literally just do another scary movie, but you just make it with Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega. They need to be the stars. You bring back Anna Faris too. She's so funny in those movies, but I would 1000% be bringing back Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega. This is the opportunity of a lifetime, and they don't do it, they are going to waste such a golden opportunity. It was so funny how as soon as this news broke, every tweet in my timeline was all saying the exact same thing: bring Melissa Barrera, which we're going to talk about a movie with Melissa Barrera today, actually. I've watched 2 Melissa Barrera movies in 2 weeks. I also posted a review on my TikTok and all my social media, actually, for a movie with Melissa Barrera, so go check it out there. But yeah, Scary Movie 6, I think it's the 6th one, right? Yeah, the 6th one is coming. I think it's coming 2026. I'm very excited. Definitely, I would do a watch back of all of them before the 6th one comes out, because those movies are very fun. I was watching them as a kid, and maybe I was a little young to be watching those, but whatever. Art is art. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap up the news there. As I said, timestamps below if you want to jump ahead and not hear anything about here because you're going to see it. It's definitely an interesting movie. I don't know if I would recommend it or not, but it's a very interesting movie to talk about. Maybe it's not the most interesting movie to watch. It's a little scary to watch, but it's not a horror. It is just terrifying, uncanny valley to watch. But let's get into the review. Hey, are you a fan of all the Marvel de-aging or Alien Romulus? Do you like that part in Captain America Civil War where they did a young Robert Downey Jr. for like 5 minutes in the movie? Well, did you want to see that for an hour and 44 minutes, but way worse and way scarier? You should go see Robert Zemeckis' movie. Here is a 2024 fantasy drama. As I said, an hour and 44 minutes. Currently has 37% on Rotten Tomatoes, 5.6 on IMDb, and about a 3 out of 5 on Letterboxd, I think. Directed and written by Robert Zemeckis. Of course, it is also written by Eric Roth. The budget is said to be $50 million, which, if that's the case, that's kind of nuts, because a project with all of this CGI and de-aging and AI, or maybe they saved a bunch of money by using AI. The film stars Tom Hanks as Richard Young, Robin Wright as Margaret Young, Paul Bettany as Al, Kelly Riley as Rose, Michelle Dockery as Mrs. Harder, Gwilyn Lee as John Harder, Ophelia Lovibond as Stella Beekman, David Finn as Leo, Leslie Zemeckis as Elizabeth Franklin, Nepo baby, Jonathan Aris as Earl Higgins, Albie Salter as Jimmy, Lily Aspel as Bethany, Lauren McQueen as young Elizabeth, Billy Gadsden as Elizabeth from 5 to 8, Harry Marcus as young Jimmy, Ben Wiggins, Joel Ouellette as Indigenous Man, Danny McCallum as Indigenous Woman, Nikki Amuka Bird as Helen Harris, Muhammad George as Winston, and Dexter Saul Ansel. That is probably the most confusing cast list, but here we go. Here, this is the synopsis. Every time I'm saying here, that's the title. I'm not saying like here we go, but no pun intended. An odyssey through time and memory centered around a place in New England where, from wilderness and then later from a home, love, loss, struggle, hope, and legacy play out between couples and families over generations. And, oh man, here, what can I say about here? So this was honestly terrifying. If you hated the Polar Express because of the animation, if you hate all de-aging in movies, like you saw Captain Marvel with Samuel L. Jackson de-aged, you don't like when they de-aged Robert Downey Jr., if you hate all the de-aging in any movie, this is 40 times worse than all of that. This is CGI slop. Like, you may as well watch those crappy AI trailers that people put on Facebook, Twitter, where they use the Life Engine or whatever. It's awful. Like, oh my god, there's a concept here, but it's just so hollow. But let's break it down. We have so much to talk about. So let's start with the performances, of course, because I think it's fascinating to to study the performances in this because there's so much in this that feels like it's not really people. There isn't a single great performance in this. There wasn't one person in this where I was like, oh, they're doing pretty good. Everyone is just misguided by Zemeckis' directing. Tom Hanks as Richard Young, like there are flickers of a possible authentic performance. And then you see that glossy 80s Tom Hanks deep faked in frame pulls you right out of it. Same with Robin Wright as Margaret Young. She's simultaneously given so much to do, but also absolutely nothing. I think that kind of goes for everyone in this movie. It's the most melodramatic thing. Everyone has so much they're swinging for, but they're really given such hollow things to do. I think Tom Hanks and Robin Wright are doing as best they can in this. Like, I think Tom Hanks especially, I think a lot of his quality comes through at times. I think there are moments where he is actually very good, but Robin Wright, I don't know. There was a few moments in this where I was like, ooh, that was bad. But I think let's get to the worst person in this, to be honest, for me, was Paul Bettany as Al. I thought he was absolutely terrible in this. Like, the directing really let everybody down, and the writing, of course. Like, they really just wrote everyone as cheesy and corny. Paul Bettany has a really bad American accent in this, where he's just doing that generic American accent that British actors do, like a AKA Dr. House or a Doctor Strange. He is just a generic, belligerent, angry veteran that drinks after World War II and yells at everyone. It's just, it's like painful to watch sometimes with him. Kelly Riley as Rose plays Richard's mom / Paul Bettany's wife, and she is also just given so much to do, but so little. There's nothing interesting. Everyone in this movie, nobody's given anything interesting to do, really. There's two characters in this movie that I thought were fascinating. So the story is based on a graphic novel from, I think, 2014. So Here was a 6-page comic strip by Richard Maguire, published in Raw, Volume 2, Number 1, in 1989. In 2010, Maguire announced a graphic novel version, Here, expanded to 300 pages, full color. It was published by Pantheon Books in December 2014. Very popular, and that's what this movie is based on. I would wager a guess that they absolutely butchered it, made the characters less dimensional than the comic story or the graphic novel story, where they're two-dimensional there. In this, they are all one-dimensional, melodramatic, corny, and we'll get into perhaps stereotypes and generalizations about certain groups and people in this film, but the cast, everyone is giving the most over-the-top, campy, corny, cheesy. It's just the characters. There's two interesting characters in this movie, I want to say, and that's it. It's such a fascinating idea, and I think that's why it's a good graphic novel. A lot of people love the graphic novel, and I am very curious to read it after this. But as a film, it just doesn't work for me. I think this would be a good exhibition at a history museum, to like have a display where there's this film playing through a display window, and then you have a screen behind the window, because this played like one of those special IMAX things at the really massive IMAX screens at museums or whatever. You know what I'm talking about? Like the ones where you're lying on your back and looking up and it's the whole ceiling and wall. That is an IMAX screen. That would be a lot better for this delivery method versus going to a theatrical model. This was a tough watch. It's weird because it's interesting and I was entertained, but it's too much. It's so excess while having nothing interesting to say at the same time. Like, so of course, as you would see from the trailer, it goes through all these different timelines from dinosaur times until the present day, and it's only focused on one shot. You only get one single frame of the entire film, and you're just looking from there. So it goes from the dinosaur times, indigenous pre-colonization, William Franklin, the 1920s, 1939 to 1942, this couple the husband's an inventor, Al and Rose. Then it goes to Richard and Margaret, who move in after them. Then you have Helen and Winston, who move in like 2019 or something like that. And I do like the idea of looking at one frame all the way from the extinction of dinosaurs to now, but the way it's dealt with and the CGI is so distracting and really is just covering for such a lackluster, zero interest story. Like, it is so hollow, this movie, and all of the CGI and gimmicky stuff is just so dangling keys, distracting you from an underwhelming script. Like, honestly, one of the worst scripts this year by far. Some of the dialogue in this is painful, like tears in my eyes, painful to listen to. And I really think like this movie is all just gimmick. You can clearly tell there is a 60-plus-year-old actor playing a teenager here with Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. You can tell there's an old person. It's exactly like Sigourney Weaver playing the young Avatar in Avatar: The Way of Water, the daughter or whatever. You can tell that's an old person. Sorry, not an old person. 60 is not old. My parents are in their 60s and I still think of them as very young. You can tell there's a fully grown adult playing a high school student that is 40 years older than that age. You can tell in their voice. They just, when you get older, you pick up a certain slowness in your voice, or like a more of a calmness, versus when you're younger, you're such a spitfire and kind of just like rambling and jumping around, and you're much more punctual. You can tell in this, it's so clearly fully grown adults playing, and like the de-aging just doesn't work. You can still see the like smile lines and everything. They just look like plastic old people instead of CGI models of young people. So the CGI just doesn't work. It's exactly like what's it called? The Irishman, the Marty Scorsese movie. You can tell by the way they're moving, and same with like Samuel L. Jackson in the Marvel movies when he's de-aged. They still physically embody old people, kind of like the way they're moving at times, versus in this, I think the AI model they used, let me just pull up the name of it. It was called Metaphysic Live. So this comes from ScreenRant.com, who said, Here used a new de-aging AI known as Metaphysic Live. The producers of Here used a brand new visual effects technology to de-age Hanks and Wright to the ages they needed to be for each scene. So I think it's the ability where you can cut people's faces onto it and they create a body. So it's like a metaphysical thing where it's very weird, because at times they are moving like young people, but all of their expression and everything, you can just tell it's all so empty, just hard to watch. Like it's hard to watch at times. It's very uncomfortable and kind of uncanny valley, where I can't tell if I'm dealing with humans or robots. It's not fun. The whole movie just has such a gloss to it. Even like, I don't know, the CGI doesn't work, and going back all the way to the Indigenous storyline, you can tell exactly where the green screen and the CGI starts and where there is a real set. Like I could pinpoint it. When I was watching the nature parts with this Indigenous couple that we're following for maybe 5 minutes in the movie, not even. I think they get 2 scenes, and we'll get into that in a moment. I have a lot to say about representation and using people in this story. There is such a clear divide of, okay, there's the green screen, there's this clearly fake grass, because it just looks like an IMAX exhibit or an art exhibit. Like it's crazy. I feel like I'm at the nature museum at times, or a history museum. And not even does the de-aging not work, but the old age makeup is so bad in this. Whenever they age people up to play seniors, it's terrible. It just looks like a Saturday Night Live sketch. And that's being rude to Saturday Night Live, because honestly, whenever they do that sketch with Adam Driver where he comes into the school as that old man, that's how everybody looked, but way worse in this film. Like you can just tell it's young people trying to play. It's very like high school theater stage play kind of, where it's like, oh, you're clearly a young person playing an old person, because everything is so exaggerated about this. There's just nothing believable in either the past or the present. And pacing wise, this movie is a nightmare. It blows by because there's always stuff happening, but there's so much happening. It's so much excess, cutting from different parts, and it's like interesting the way, if you go on the Wikipedia, you'll see exactly what it does in the movie if you look up the graphic novel, because it does like a frame in the screen and then cuts to that time period and shows what was there at that time. So pacing wise, this movie, when it ended, I was not at all like, oof, that was a nightmare, because it was slow. It was a nightmare because as fast as the movie's, every second is just plastic CGI nightmare. And I think there are too many storylines in this. That's why the pacing is kind of a nightmare, because anytime you're just starting to kind of get your footing, I would say especially in the first 20 to 30 minutes, because it's establishing kind of how this movie's going to work. Like, okay, get used to this because we're going to be cutting. But just when kind of our main storyline with Tom Hanks and Robin Wright is really picking up, it keeps cutting back to whatever, I don't know, the War of 1812 or the invention of something in the 1930s that I won't mention until spoilers, because it's hilarious when it pops up. You're like, I can't believe what a random storyline to do. But it's just, it doesn't work. And I think, look, I'm a huge Forrest Gump fan. I love Forrest Gump, but that movie is extremely melodramatic, and this movie is 4,000 times worse. The Zemeckis loves his melodrama, and he does not stray away from it here, because there is so much that is just over the top dialogue, reactionary acting that is a nightmare to watch at times. Like specifically Paul Bettany, his character is so over the top. He's trying so hard in this movie, and it's very difficult to watch, especially with his really bad American accent. The storytelling's just insane of this, and some of the stuff that's jam-packed in there is painful, to be frank. Okay, let's talk about stereotypes and generalizations. So, like I said, the storylines. There is Indigenous pre-colonization, William Franklin, the 1920s pilot, 1939 to 1942 inventor, Alan Rose, Richard and Margaret, Helen and Winston. Helen and Winston are a black family that move in like 2019, 2020, because it's right before COVID. This isn't a spoiler, but spoiler alert, they do have like COVID in this. COVID is a thing in this movie for one scene, and I hated that. Everybody is just kind of written as a caricature and the most like generalized version of themselves. Like the indigenous people are written so simply and are kind of just like, you know, dangling keys in front of you, being like, oh, look, it's very like put them in a box and analyze them. And even everybody in the story is just written as like, what would people be like in this time? And it's just the most bog standard stuff. Like, oh, Al is a veteran coming home from World War II. He's going to be a drinker and yell at his kids and wife. And like, oh, the 1920s plane pilot, the wife is going to worry about the husband becoming a pilot. And that's all they are, versus the 1930s inventor. They were fun. They were the most fun part of the movie, but oh, they were just partying and having sex once the Great Depression ended and they were going into the war in the 1940s. Like they were just partying and drinking and, you know, enjoying. And I saw a really funny letterbox that was like, of course, the only couple without kids is the most fun in the movie. I want to read this one letterboxed review. I'm going to read part of it, and then in the spoilers, I'm going to come back to it. But so this comes from Courtney Howard, who gave it here 2 stars. She said, I am not here for Robert Zemeckis' Here. It did not work for me. The graphic novel by Richard Maguire is inventive and creative. However, this adaptation stinks, not honoring the source material with proper internal life and connective tissue. He and co-writer Eric Roth would rather give Robin Wright Alzheimer's than agency. People of color and their stories are ornamental and, quite frankly, insulting. It's so true. Everyone is kind of an accessory in this film. They have like 3 or 2 scenes with the family at the end who move into the home. So it's this black couple who have a 16-year-old son who's just getting his driver's license. One of their 2 scenes is, of course, breaking down police brutalization, and it's just like they can't exist outside of being abused by the police or they don't have like an interesting life, and they're not complex. They don't have anything fascinating going on about them other than COVID and having to be scared of the police. Like it doesn't show any talents they have, or, you know, like Tom Hanks and Robin Wright are shown as people with interests, and a lot of people in this movie, like the inventor or the painters and whatever, the pilot, they're all shown as having like fascinating hobbies and they're all interested in stuff, versus the indigenous couple at the start, or not the start, I guess in the timeline at the start before colonization. They're interesting because they're in love with each other, but they're kind of depicted as very bog standard spiritual. Then you cut to the people of color at the end, like this black family. They're only shown as being concerned about what to do when you're pulled over by a cop. It just feels very generalizing, stereotypical. And it's funny how even the white people are written as stereotypes in this. Al comes home as a belligerent drunk that just yells at his family and doesn't realize until he's older that he has like maybe PTSD. It's some of the weirdest writing, and Robert Zemeckis just really has such a nostalgia for the good old times, which is very clear in Forrest Gump as well. But is this movie, there were times where I asked myself, is this one big stereotype? You know, like I'm a straight white dude. Sometimes I do need to check myself and be like, what am I consuming? What's the message and what's the delivery? It did like halfway through was very clear of, oh, this is a weird movie. Like almost feels like a museum exhibit of stereotyping everyone. I don't know. It's just all just feels very general and very surface level, and it's surface level to a point where it's insulting. You know, like what is the story really trying to show? I get that it's about love and loss and like trying to show that we're all connected maybe somehow, but it doesn't have anything interesting to say other than being a gimmick of de-aging and showing all these different timelines. There's nothing inherently, I don't know, interesting about its message of like, oh, we're really trying to poke at something here though. It's just very standard and it's very simple, and it's a shame because I love Forrest Gump, but I don't know, I'm struggling to see like what is Robert Zemeckis trying to achieve here other than some gimmick and generalizing. Like I don't think he's trying, or he is like racist and trying to show things in a racist way. I think he's trying to do something, and maybe I feel like there are possibly good intentions here of like, oh, I'm trying to show that we're all kind of the same and we all have our own issues and stuff like that. And he's trying to highlight the different issues of different times, but the way it's done is just kind of accessorizing and generalizing anyone. Okay, we'll move on. And it's kind of just very stereotypical Robert Zemeckis. Like if you watch Forrest Gump, I'm going to keep talking about Forrest Gump because it is like my favorite Zemeckis movie. If you watch Forrest Gump, there's a lot of like, swapping in Forrest Gump into the background of historical events, right? There's a lot of technology involved in that film. And this movie turns that up to 1,000. Like this is to the max. Oh my absolute God. This is the most technology fetish heavy movie. He's obsessed with digitally altering everything in the frame. There's nothing nothing authentic about this. I don't know how much was real, how much was really a set. Like, you could have told me just the floor was there, everything else was green screen around, and I would believe you. Like I said, in the storyline with the indigenous couple, I could tell exactly where maybe the volume or the green screen started. I don't know if it was volume or green screen. I could tell exactly where that background started because there's such a clear color difference in the grass, the sunlight, everything. It's terrifying. And then outside of the front window of the house that you see in the trailer, it's such a fake glossy. I can't remember who did the cinematography for this. I think it was Don Burgess, and it's so bad. It looks so ugly. It's just lit like a Marvel movie where everything is so either gray or plastic coloring. I don't know. It just looks like a bunch of dolls on screen. That's what's so terrifying to me. This is very much just like, look, I love Forrest Gump, but that's also a very like, there's these heroes that go through all these moments or whatever. You know, it has a lot to say about a lot of events. And this movie is really no different. This movie is very, remember that? Remember this? Oh, look, she's wearing a MASH t-shirt. Oh, look, the Brady Bunch. Oh, look, whatever. Oh, the Three Stooges on TV. Like, remember the past? It's all just Robert Zemeckis saying, ugh, the past was so great, and now everybody's just dying, and there's like police brutality. It's like, no, man, there's been issues all the time. There has been issues throughout time. And like, he does talk about that. You know, everybody had their own issues through time, but there's nothing fun or positive really about the present, which I find so interesting about this. It's a lot of Robert Zemeckis in his old age, just pointing to the past and being like, ugh, remember the good old days when it was all, you know, so much simpler and we just got yelled at and moved on with it. I don't know. It's weird. It's such a weird script. And that's why I'm so fascinated to read the graphic novel to see if it has such a love of the past as this does. The use of the word here in the movie is obnoxious. Every time they say, I love it here, I'd love to stay here, there's always like a pause before they say here. So obnoxious. Like, it's, oh my God, I've seen so many Letterboxd reviews of like, oh, they should make a drinking game of the word here because they say it so much in the movie. And same with Tom Hanks saying, wow, time sure flies. I think he says it 100 times in the movie, but I don't know. I've just been kind of rambling about how much I hated this, but what did I actually like about this? Maybe Alan Silvestri's score. That's about it. I love his Avengers scores. I love his Forrest Gump score. Other than that, I don't know. There's not a lot I liked about this. I thought the movie was ugly. It looks so clear and glossy, like a museum film or like an exhibit, but the score is at times okay. I have a lot to say in spoilers as well, because there's tons I haven't talked about. So overall, I am kind of annoyed because this was entertaining and like a real theatrical experience. It has so much excess and so much wasted potential. I'm definitely going to read the book because it's a fascinating concept that, because of Zemeckis's direction and his writing with Eric Roth, comes off as very campy, melodramatic, gimmicky, and stereotypical. It's very cheesy. I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. I don't even know if I would recommend it. Like, if you want to go see it as an experience, go see it, but it's not a good movie that you're going to enjoy. It's more of, you should watch this as an experiment and go see this CGI movie. I don't know. If you're going to spend money to go to the movies, go see Conclave, go see Your Monster, go see another film that's good in theaters, because it's not good. But let's move on to spoilers. Okay, I think the question everyone had going into this film, dinosaurs. Do we keep cutting back to the dinosaurs? Nope. It's about 40 seconds in the movie that you see dinosaurs, and it's just the meteorite or whatever, the meteor coming down to crush the dinosaurs, and then the earth lights on fire. That's it. Moves on very quickly. So do we get dinosaurs? No, I'm sorry. Okay, Franklin, Washington. There's a whole storyline about across from the house where our story is taking place is Benjamin Franklin's illegitimate son's house, Franklin, Washington. So we see archaeologists show up. Shout out archaeologists. I work for an archaeology firm. That was fun to see. In like the 70s, they show up because the indigenous people that lived there's a necklace that the wife was buried with, so they show up. So there's this whole storyline around the War of 1812, and the fact that it's like Benjamin Franklin's illegitimate son living here felt so pointless. It's just, again, it's like Forrest Gump, where we just have to play these historical events to be like, oh, remember this? That was pretty crazy. I love American history. It's so pointless. Every time you're just starting to get invested in the Tom Hanks, Robin Wright, Paul Bettany dynamic of those three, of like Richard and Al trying to work out their relationship of father and son, and then Robin Wright as Margaret and Richard trying to work out their relationship as husband and wife, which at times did strike a chord with me, but for the most part just felt very hollow and plastic. We cut back to friggin' Benjamin Franklin's illegitimate son, and Benjamin Franklin shows up in this, and it's a goddamn jump scare. It's terrifying. So like, again, what is this movie trying to say? We all love, we all lose people. Our existence is original or unoriginal, like the banality of unoriginalness or existence. I don't know. It's not a clear thing. It's just kind of flashing keys in front of our eyes. But like I said, it was funny that the best timeline and the one I enjoyed the most in this movie was the guy who invented the lazy boy with his wife. They're just dancing. They're super in love. That was the most fun. I could have just watched a movie about the invention of the lazy boy over every other storyline in this movie. That was the only one that brought me joy because I was like, oh, look how much fun they're having. This rocks. The plane storyline where there's this guy in the 1920s who bought a plane and his wife hates the ideas of he takes his daughter up. He dies from influenza because it's the Spanish flu. Oh my God. That storyline was depressing. Oh my dear God. There's so much pity and depression in this movie. It's sad as hell and just so, oh man, the old times were hard, but people had to work hard versus now, you know? It's like, I don't get what you're trying to say, but the most fun I had in this movie was watching this super in love romantic couple where the husband's inventing the lazy boy from like 1938 to 1942 because we see, he's like, oh, the 40s are going to be great. Cut to the bombing of Pearl Harbor. That's the next scene. It was like, Jesus Christ. Robert Zemeckis being so melodramatic. I don't know. It was funny that was the best timeline. It's a weird thing in this movie where it's like, oh, men used to invent things and now they paint when they're young and they give up on it and they drink and they have to worry about insurance. Like I don't know. It's odd. There's a lot of weird storylines we're following in this where I do feel like from the sense I've gotten from kind of doing some background reading about the graphic novel is there's a lot more connective tissue between the scenes and a lot more crossover versus in the movie, there's not tons connecting. Like there's not tons of connecting strings between our timelines. There's little things like passing down the house from a family or whatever. I don't know. There's no relation really between the lazy boy inventor couple and, you know, Al when they move in after the war. It's just, it kind of bounces around a little bit too much. And that's why I said in the first 20 to 30 minutes, they're really jumping scene to scene and it's a little obnoxious. Whereas in the second half, I do think it really focuses in on Richard and Margaret, her developing her Alzheimer's or dementia. I'm not sure what it is. And them actually separating. They get separated, which felt weird. Like I didn't know why that was going towards that. I didn't really think that was a necessary story beat. I was like, oh, why are they breaking up? I think it would have been a much more enjoyable story if you saw them kind of gain their independence and Richard gain his love of painting back when their daughter goes to Vanessa. I think it's Vanessa, when she goes to law school. And then maybe even you send Robin Wright's character Margaret to law school after. I think that's a way less depressing movie, but yeah, I don't know. Okay. Yeah, there's a COVID jump scare in this where they start talking about COVID. I already mentioned that in non-spoilers. I hated that. Almost as bad as the Benjamin Franklin jump scare. This movie's just a lot of dudes like mourning the death of their wives or the Alzheimer's of their wives. I want to read you a couple Letterboxd reviews. So this one person went to a Q&A. Their username is Divya and they gave it 2 stars. They said, I find it so telling that in the Q&A after, without even being prompted by a question of any kind first, Tom Hanks went on a very long speech defending the use of AI in this film. And I think that's all I'll say on that. This would have been a much better play. I totally agree. I feel like there is honestly a morally bankrupt aspect of this film that I really hated. Like it just feels very empty. Like I gave it 2.5 out of 5 because there are parts that I enjoyed and it was like, oh, I want to see what happens with these stories. So I was clearly entertained, but they all feel so basic and hollow, if that makes sense. Okay, Carl Von Rando gave it 3 stars, said sentimental and intriguing. A life story from the perspective of a living room. A slow life and poignant with its banality. I enjoyed the presentation of literal changing windows into the past and future. At times it's heavy-handed, but I was still pleasantly moved. Yeah, it's very heavy-handed in its delivery methods of its messaging, and I think that's where it kind of loses any subtlety and comes across as trying to perpetuate stereotypes because it's just trying to paint everyone with very broad strokes and just generalizing. And I think there's a very fine line you're walking there, Robert Zemeckis and Eric Roth, of showing of, oh yes, like people who come from this background, this was a very common experience versus, oh, like black parents only teach their children about police brutalization and that's all they have to worry about versus them having normal jobs and like things to worry about. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's very odd. Or veterans coming home from World War II and all they do is drink and yell about their wives and their life and, oh, I was going to be someone. Like every character in this, I felt bad for because they're kind of just experiencing the most dramatic things in their lives. I'll read this third letterbox, then we're going to move move on to what else I watched. So Mark Hansen didn't give it a rating, but he reviewed The Boomer Struggle is Real. You're handed down a beautiful mortgage-free house from your folks, but feel unsatisfied because it's not, quote, your space. Think I would have preferred if this was just a straight Forrest Gump sequel, to be honest. Quote, time flies is like the new Life is like a box of chocolates. Hard to say what's creepier. Tom Hanks's dead-eyed mocap conductor from the Polar Express or AIDH teenager Tom Hanks in this one. Yes, there is a lot of, like I said, scary stuff in this film that I think people will be very put off by when they're watching. It's just a lot of feeling like I don't know what's real, what's fake. I don't know what I can really enjoy in this, you know? But as the great Forrest Gump said, that's all I have to say about that. I feel like this will be a shorter spoiler section because I really just, there's not tons to say about this other than just bashing really the CGI. And I have lots of stuff to talk about in what else I watched. So here, I don't know, would I recommend it? Again, it's like an interesting exhibit, but it's not something that I say you have to go see in theaters. I don't think come Oscar time, I will be very shocked if it gets any Oscars. Like maybe it'll get, I don't know, visual effects, but it's not good visual effects in my opinion. So I think there's way better movies out there for visual effects, but I have tons to talk about in what else I watched. So let's move on to that. Okay, what else I watched? So let's begin with TV shows. The Penguin, of course, phenomenal again this week. I'm bummed we have 2 episodes left. I cannot wait though. Like I am so excited for Sunday nights to sit down at like 9:20 when it's no longer airing live and you can just play it on your own stream, because I find the live stream on Crave isn't as good quality as versus when you're streaming it by yourself. Another Dynamite episode. We might do an episode specifically on Penguin in 2 weeks, but we'll see what happens. I also finally started What We Do in the Shadows season 5. I watched all of season 5 and then I started the current final season 6. Hilarious. Season 6, Tim Heidecker shows up. He's hilarious in it. But season 5, Guillermo, Laszlo, Nandor, Colin, Nadia, everyone is just dynamite. I love seeing that it's filmed in Toronto because like I haven't lived in Toronto, but my girlfriend went to school there. I've gone to Toronto a bunch of times, so it's fun seeing all the locations of like, oh, I recognize that. That's definitely Toronto versus New York. But I think What We Do in the Shadows is literally one of the best written comedy shows of the last 15 years. It is so solid. I think I'm going to rewatch the movie because I watch it once a year. I love What We Do in the Shadows, the movie, but the TV show is just as good. It is so funny, punch for punch every season. I'm loving season 6 as well. I'm going to keep binging it week to week now that I've caught up, I believe, to the week to week part. I love the direction they take. It feels like every season is fresh and it's just a great comedy show. It's very funny. My favorite episode of season 5 was probably the news station one where Nandor kind of reveals that they're vampires on live TV, so they have to hypnotize everyone to like go on live TV. That was very funny. There's just, I don't know, every episode is just so jam-packed with great jokes, great writing. I also finished Only Murders in the Building this week. It was the season 4 wrap-up. It was good. I think I kind of lost steam for it a little bit after season 3 because season 3 was a pretty big quality drop for me writing-wise. I think they tried to maybe spin it in new directions, but season 4 was really good. I liked what they did. I won't spoil anything, but the finale was great. I'm very excited for season 5. I think they seriously do deserve props because they're very good at getting a season out every year. Same with The Bear. There's something about Only Murders in the Building. They are outstanding the way they churn out a season once a year, and props to them because it's like a very high quality show. It's so well written. It's so smart. It's hilarious. It has a great mystery to it. I'm not a true crime guy, but I love watching Only Murders in the Building. I'm very excited. I will love the last 2 episodes. I love season 4 as a whole. I think it was a huge improvement on season 3. And finally, Survivor. What an episode this week. Oh my God. We were losing it while watching it. Saul gave the safety without power to Rachel. I was praying he would. Please, Saul, do something big. And his acting when he sent it to her, I'm kind of upset that they did the twist of splitting it to 2 teams and half the people are safe and half the people are up for elimination minus the one who wins the challenge. But it did create some fun drama by giving Saul the advantage. Again, Andy is a total mess this season, but I think he is so entertaining to watch. I don't think the show lost anything without Rome. I was a little worried without losing your biggest villain, what's going to happen. But I have to say the editing is so great this season. That Survivor has been very well edited since season 45, I would say. But specifically this season, they're doing a lot of fun cutaways and montages of showing what people have said in very creative ways that I'm enjoying a lot. Okay, that's it for TV shows, but let's move into movies. I watched 6 movies this week. Let's start with It's What's Inside, a Netflix film we watched for kind of a Halloween vibes. Very fun movie. I think it kind of oversteps itself towards the end and loses itself a little bit, but it's very great. So the premise is they can all swap bodies with this machine that one of their friends brings to a bachelor party. I think the performances are a little bit much at times, but I would highly recommend watching It's What's Inside. A very interesting film that just has so much great drama and so much social commentary about groups of friends after college or university and how they reconnect with each other. Super fun. I think I gave it 3 stars or 3.5 stars on Letterboxd. We also watched High School Musical 2 and High School Musical 3 senior year. High School Musical 2, amazing. I've had Bet on It stuck in my head like all week. High School Musical 3, the step up in production quality is fascinating, even though I think the story is much worse than High School Musical 2. I still really enjoyed the third one, and I think it's a great send-off. But to me, there was a lot of unnecessary songs, or the songs meant a lot less and felt like one song specifically, The Boys Are Back, I think is what it's called. I thought that was the most random part of the story of like, this doesn't really have anything to do, at least to me. I get that they're trying to show that like, what's his name? Corbin, what's it? Corbin Blues character. Is his name Corbin in it? No, I can't remember right now for some reason. But him and Troy are trying to show like, we used to be so tight, but now we're going to go our separate ways or whatever it is, or like we're back to being ourselves. I don't know. It just didn't really work for me. Having said that, the 16-minute song at the start, such a banger. Oh my God. And everything about Ashley Tisdale, Sharpay in the third one. I think honestly, Sharpay and Kelsey are my favorite characters. Ryan is given the worst clothing ever. And Troy Bolton's awesome. I think Troy Bolton is such a perfect, model for young men who are like athletes, but interested, worried about toxic masculinity. I think this movie, the third one, had also a great message of like, don't just let sports and what people's perception of you pick your future for you. I loved what it was trying to say of like, you can do multiple things. You can be interested in other things, just like the first one said. And I loved it. Honestly, I'm a huge High School Musical fan now, and I'll definitely rewatch them. I'll just talk about this one quickly. I rewatched Dune Part 2 last weekend just because I watched the first one and I was missing the Paul Atreides storyline after reading Heretics of Dune. Dune Part 2, it would absolutely be my best picture win right now. I haven't seen Anora, haven't seen Nosferatu, haven't seen A Complete Unknown. There's still tons of great movies to come out in the rest of the year, but right now Dune Part 2 is my best picture pick. I know it's not going to get it because they hate sci-fi or whatever, but Dune Part 2 would absolutely be my pick. Your Monster, I did a review on all my social medias that you can go watch. Please go drop a like and follow all the social medias. I loved it. I thought it was so cute. Such a fun take on the Beauty and the Beast story. And Melissa Barrera, dude, she is so great. Honestly, I want her in so much stuff. She's hilarious. She has such just a natural vulnerableness to her. She plays such over the top, disgusting breakup depression in Your Monster. It's such a fun movie. If you're going to go to the movies, I have 2 that I would recommend. I would either watch Your Monster or Conclave. Your Monster, it's such a fun Beauty and the Beast. There's great musical numbers in it as well, because where she's just like singing in it. It's not technically a musical. They just happen to sing in it. Todd Phillips, take notes. It's such a fun movie. It's a fun romantic comedy that's a Beauty and the Beast modern twist, and I would totally recommend it. And Tommy Dewey as the monster is hilarious as well. Finally, I'll talk about Conclave. Ray Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, Isabella Rossellini, Lucienne Masmati. What a great movie. Holy shit. I think Oscar time we will be talking about Conclave. It has a very Oscariness to it. Made by the same person who made All Quiet on the Western Front, one of my favorite movies, honestly. All Quiet on the Western Front, I absolutely love that movie. I've watched it a few times already. It was phenomenal. I seriously enjoyed it so much. This was really great. There's times where it's kind of spinning its wheels, but for the most part, it's telling such a great story of the Cardinals picking the next pope that I just had so much fun with it. I was definitely the youngest person there. I was sat next to the only other youngest person in the entire theater. Everyone else was older than 50, definitely. So it was really fun to see like, everyone wants to come see this religious Catholic movie about picking the next pope. So that was fun to see all the old timers come out. But I loved it. I would totally recommend. I think what I loved most about it is how matter of fact it is about the Catholic Church and like the Vatican. I think, look, I'm not the most religious person. I was raised Catholic, but I'm very kind of secular now. And if you're religious, that's fine. I have nothing against that, of course. To me, there's like such a mysticism around all the cardinals and the popes, whereas this movie just kind of shows them as like guys who vape, go on their phones, gossip. It's a workplace drama. Like, it is a simplified workplace drama, which I loved, and I would totally recommend Conclave. So this week, if you want to go to the theaters, go see Your Monster, go see Conclave. If you want to watch something at home, watch It's What's Inside. good. Tons of good stuff to watch. Watch High School Musical if you haven't. But that's going to do it for what else I watched. And I think that's going to do it for episode 42 here, a nightmare CGI movie. What did you think of here? Let me know. As always, rate and review the show, share it on all of your streaming platforms, give us a 5-star rating. It helps the show grow with engagement. On Spotify now, you can drop a comment under the episode. Drop a comment under here if you're on Spotify. If you're on Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star rating and review. Same with Amazon Music, Acast. We're on all of those streaming platforms. If you're on YouTube, drop a subscribe. Hit that like button and comment below. What did you think of here? What's your favorite instance of de-aging where you're like, okay, it actually works there, versus what's your least favorite de-aging? I would honestly say this might be my least favorite de-aging, other than, actually no, Rogue One with Tarkin. That's probably my least favorite, but that's like a fully CGI person, versus this was probably my least favorite de-aging because it just felt so eerie, scary. But if you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell, subscribe, comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Go hit that like button, share on all the streaming platforms, share on YouTube, wherever, share it with a friend, help the show grow. It would be greatly appreciated. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can also get in touch with us via email, watcherofallthings@gmail.com. Write into the show. What do you want us to review this fall? What are you looking forward to? What's your favorite Halloween candy? I'd love to hear about that. We're also on social media, which is linked below. Instagram and Threads is @watcherofallthings. The TikTok is watcher.of.all.things. Letterboxd is KikiJ70. That's KIKIJ70. Follow me on there. Drop a comment on one of my reviews that you found me through the show, and I will follow you back. I'd love to follow you back. I want to quickly plug a couple things I posted on my social media this week. My Your Monster review, as I mentioned. Go drop a like on that. Comment, what did you think if you saw it? As well, I did a little graphic novel haul. Here's something crazy. Facebook Marketplace the other day. This guy is selling 29 graphic novels for $100. And he's separately selling Dark Victory and The Long Halloween, which are two Batman stories I've wanted for a long time, for $40. So I offer him 80. He says yes for the 29 books. But then I say, I'll give you 100 if you throw in the other two. And he's like, oh, I can't let those go for less than 40. So I say, okay, I'll give you 40. So in total, I paid $120 for 31 graphic novels. So go see on social media. I added up how much they're all worth together if I was to buy them brand new, wherever they're available. The price is insane. Go like that video. Go check it out. Comment below. You can find all that good info. It's all linked below. Like I said, go rate, review on all the streamers, like and subscribe on YouTube, email, social medias. Find my letterbox. You can see where here ranks on my 2024 ranked list. Next week, Anora. Finally, I'm going away for work, but I will be back in time to watch Anora, get a podcast in, and review it for you guys. Happy Halloween if that's what you were celebrating last week. I don't know. Some people just don't celebrate it because they don't care. I totally get it. I hope your November is wonderful, successful, all of your dreams come true, and I will see you in the next one.